To predict whether a person will actually thrive in retirement, we have to look past their bank account and measure their psychological adjustment. For decades, institutions have tried to model this adjustment using 5 broad pillars: health, finances, exit conditions, social participation, and marital relationships. The models treat these categories as monolithic blocks of equal ambiguous weight. Relying on these generalized classifications creates a blind spot. Institutions pour resources into the wrong areas because the models fail to accurately predict human behavior. To fix this predictive failure, we have to break open these broad categories and isolate the granular data hiding underneath. In 2022, researchers at the University of Queensland published a 3-level meta-analysis to solve this exact problem. They filtered nearly 50 years of literature, narrowing over 11,000 records down to a highly specific dataset of 139 independent samples and more than 78,000 participants. Their findings suggest that predictive power does not live in global categories, it lives in specific subfactors. By applying statistical rigor to this massive dataset, we can mathematically deconstruct the standard models and isolate the exact variables driving psychological outcomes. We have to shatter the old framework and rebuild the predictive profile entirely from the data up. This table shows the global hierarchy of predictors using Pearson's R correlation coefficients. Psychosocial variables dictate the hierarchy. Social participation at 0.23 and physical health at 0.22 are the most dominant. Objective measures like finances and exit conditions carry significantly less weight. But these top-line averages are deceptive. The 80% prediction intervals for these categories are extremely wide. Look at the variance. An 80% prediction interval spanning from -0.12 to +0.42 indicates massive internal heterogeneity. The math tells us that these global labels are masking wild, contradictory internal data points. A high average effect size is useless for modeling if the category is too heterogeneous. We have to break them open to see what is skewing the math. We start with the highest performing global category, social participation. The researchers broke this down into 9 distinct subfactors. At the absolute bottom is logistical social preparedness, planning social activities. It yields a statistically insignificant correlation of 0.02. Compare that directly to the highest performing variable in the cluster, ease of maintaining a social life, which drives a massive 0.40 correlation. Right behind it is social identification with groups, pulling a strong 0.31. Logistical planning and the raw quantity of new interactions fail to track with how people actually adapt to this life change. The statistical weight comes entirely from the continuity of existing group identities and the lack of friction in maintaining those established ties. Institutional advice focuses on making new friends, but the data prioritizes preserving existing social identities as the true driver of adjustment. The exact same heterogeneity fractures our second category, physical health. When we look at the objective medical metric, the clinical diagnosis of a disease, we see a correlation of 0.13. A clinical diagnosis alone is a weak predictor of psychological adjustment, but the subjective metric, daily health symptoms, hits 0.43. This is the single most powerful variable identified in the entire study. A clinically diagnosed, managed disease disrupts a retiree's psychology far less than the daily friction of physical symptoms. Institutions heavily fund clinical healthcare coverage, but that infrastructure ignores the daily subjective burden that actually dictates quality of life. Subjective daily physical friction overrides objective clinical pathology charts when calculating psychological well-being. The researchers also ran a moderation analysis to test if these correlations held steady across their 50-year dataset. Standard demographics like age and gender did not significantly alter the predictive outcomes, but the year of publication did. The predictive model is not static, it is shifting over time. In modern literature, the predictive power of finances is actively increasing, while the relative weight of social participation is slightly decreasing. With the changing macroeconomic conditions and evolving pension structures separating baby boomers from prior cohorts. The baseline is a moving target. As modern safety nets erode, Financial friction is beginning to eat into the psychological buffer previously provided by social ties. We can now completely discard the old 5-category institutional model and build a highly specific, data-driven predictive profile. At the core of our predictability zone sit the highest yield variables, health symptoms at 0.43 and maintaining social ties at 0.40. Highly funded priorities like gradual transitions or general financial preparedness are pushed to the extreme outer periphery, away from core psychological relevance. Academic researchers and organizational planners can no longer treat health or social integration as monolithic variables. An optimized model must focus directly on subjective symptom management and the strict preservation of social identity. This data provides immediate, practical application for organizational behavior planners. This hierarchy reveals why traditional, finance-heavy exit seminars struggle to influence long-term well-being. They are optimized for variables that the data shows have minimal impact on adjustment. It also validates the specific intervention recommended by the meta-analysis authors, the Groups for Health framework. This peer-reviewed framework targets the exact mathematical vulnerability found in the data, actively training individuals to maintain their pre-existing social ties across the exit timeline. Retirement functions as a profound transition of identity, dictated by who we remain connected to.